Well, it looks like I have 10:03 Eastern, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so very much for your willingness to spend a couple of minutes with the Complete College America team to discuss launching a 15 to finish strategy at minority serving institutions. My name is Donnie Wellston. I'm the Vice President for Strategy at Complete College America, and I am extremely pleased and honored to be able to work with many of you and some of you that may be joining for the first time, sharing a little bit about this exciting strategy that's taking place around the country. Before we begin, I'd like to kind of just do a quick check-in. One of my colleagues and our strategy director at CCA, Nicholas Hewitt, is on the line. And so I want to start off by just kind of taking a quick poll just to see who's in the room or who's online. And so there are two questions on this poll. We'll scroll through the first one and then the second one. So the first question is, what is your campus role? And so if you can just kind of click on your submission of the role that you play. If that role is not listed here, by all means, feel free to click other. Just think it's a good way just to get a good idea of where we are and who's online. And once you get through that question, there'll be a second poll, which will kind of ask you a little bit about how you're connected with this initiative. We know that some of the institutions are working in our initial cohort of minority serving institutions, and some of you might have just heard about the larger webinar, and so we want to find out about that as well. So I'll give you a couple of seconds just to kind of chime in on both of those polls. Okay, we'll give you about maybe 15 more seconds to click in on poll number 1 as well as poll number 2. And if you haven't figured out by now, you have to scroll down a little bit to click on the second poll. All right, Nicholas, can you tell us a little bit about the individuals that we have online, if you don't mind?
Sure. So right now it looks like pretty much similar to Monday, where we have a lot of retention and academic advisors, retention coordinators, or people who are related to retention and academic advising, as well as a good number of folks from the student affairs side and student services aspect of it. A few numbers from the provost office, as well as higher education system leaders. And it's nice to know that, from how you guys heard from the webinar, a lot of them from you guys are on the implementation team, but I see that the implementation team has also shared the link. So we have folks from heard from the implementation team as well as on the web platform, which will make our communications teams quite happy that this bit work as well and was well publicized.
Good. All right, so now we have that bit of housekeeping out the way. A couple of things I think may also be helpful just to share. If you have not used Zoom before, if you kind of hover either over the top or sometimes over the bottom, depending on how your screen is set up, there is an ability for you to chat and ask any particular questions. And so as we go through, if something comes to mind, please go ahead and start typing. Nicholas will kind of cue me in if there's anything that we need to hit on. We'll obviously have time at the end to get through all of those questions that are listed. So with that being said, I know we have a few folks on the line that don't have the same level of familiarity with Complete College America, so I'll just kind of give you a broad overview. We are we're a nonprofit based in Indianapolis, with a primary mission, and that's to ensure that more students receive college degrees, whether that be certificates or credentials, but things that are purposeful and valuable to them and their family and the country as a whole. One of the things that people, most of you are probably listed in this group of participating institutions, what we've learned over the years is that we have a major problem with college completion and college attainment. What we also know is that we will not get to our national goals without focusing on certain institutions, and particularly minority serving institutions that serve some of our most vulnerable populations of students, and for many, many years have really worked to ensure that students of color, in particular, first generation low income students, get access to a high quality education. And so what we decided to do was we realized that, just kind of focusing broadly on states and systems was not going to cut it for us. And so we launched this minority serving institution Momentum Pathways initiative with the institutions that are listed here, with a generous grant from the Kresge Foundation. And all of these institutions committed to launching an on-time to degree completion campaign for their students in fall of 2018. They also agreed to share some data and to start identifying content experts, individuals from their institution that will be willing to share what they've learned and their success with other institutions across the country. This is extremely important work for me, not just as a strategy director at Complete College America, but also because I'm a graduate of a historically Black college, Clark Atlanta University in Atlanta, Georgia. And what I know is that the work that is done on those campuses, whether it's a Hispanic serving institution or an HBCU, it's noble work, it's important work, and the families and our communities are absolutely relying on us to get this right. So when we think about this campaign, we have a number of people that are helping us with that. We are not doing it on our own. We're also utilizing the expertise of some of my colleagues and some of the CCA consultants. Dr. Nia Heidel and Dr. Jose Luis Santos are both on the line right now. And I want to kind of just give them a quick second to introduce themselves and kind of share why they think this initiative is so important. Dr. Heidel has been working primarily with the HBCUs on this project, and Dr. Santos with the Hispanic Serving Institution. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Dr. Heidel, and then we'll hear from Dr. Santos.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really pleased and excited to be working with Complete College America on this initiative. I currently work at Dillard University, which is in New Orleans, and I'm responsible for academic initiatives, predominantly around making sure that students are taking 15 credit hours in their per semester, but also looking at policies that support students being enrolled at this level within to being enrolled in the maximum number of hours that they can, also monitoring different issues related to progression and retention. And I think that this is valuable because, as Dr. Elston indicated, we know that we have to do things differently in order to be able to move our populations to graduation within a timely fashion. And so I think that we have the opportunity here to establish national models on how we can really move the needle on student success as it relates to this group of students in particular. So I'm just very excited to work with you all. And if there's anything I can do to support you, please just feel free to always contact me and let me know.
Good morning, everyone. This is Jose Luis Santos. Ditto for the most part. I've been committed to this work for a long time in my previous role as a VP of Higher Education Policy and Practice at the Education Trust, where I spearheaded an initiative working with MSIs. And what I'm really mostly excited about with this initiative is that, again, it's working very intentionally with HBCUs and HSIs. As was indicated, this is very noble work. Oftentimes it's under-resourced work. So I know very familiar with the struggles you have at your institutions. But I think what is very important and exciting is that when your institutions, your institutional leaders are intentional about student success work and actually use real-time data to drive those continuous improvement efforts that actually lead to improved student success. When that happens, we definitely see the movement on the needle, both on closing achievement gaps and, again, just moving folks to the goals of graduation. So deeply excited to be a part of this. And please feel free, again, and use Dr. Heidel and myself as a resource. We're both consultants and helping out on the projects, but beyond that, we are a very direct resource to you to help you have success in your efforts. I look forward to meeting all of you at some point.
Thank you both. And now we'll just kind of jump into the meat of why you're on the line. As we identified from the earlier poll, a number of you are on the implementation team, and that may not necessarily mean that you got a chance to join us at the Complete College America annual convening, where we actually went through the strategy in depth and started talking about that initial planning. So if you are a member of the team or the planning team or a key stakeholder on campus, I'm just going to kind of walk you through the larger conversation that took place and the importance and critical nature of an on-time degree campaign, which we refer to as 15 to finish. Just some baseline data. Nationally, we had not been collecting data around, prior to Complete College America's existence, around gateway course completion, credit accumulation, time to degree, and a number of other categories that go beyond the typical IPEDS data. And so what we wanted to do was really start digging and finding out what do these numbers look like for Hispanic students, African American students, at particular types of institutions. And so Texas has a number of Hispanic serving institutions. So this is not a complete disaggregation of our entire alliance, but we really wanted to look at some schools in the state that was kind of representative of certain types of institutions. And so in Texas, as I shared, what you see here is that the on-time graduation rates at two-year Texas colleges are extremely low for both African American and Hispanic students. When you look at time to degree, and this mirrors some of our national data as well, the amount of time that it takes for a student to graduate in Texas is overwhelmingly higher than the amount of time that it should take. And if you just kind of look at those numbers, the chart on the left is for associate degree granting institutions. So a two-year degree taking many of our students almost 4 or 5 years, and even at four-year institutions, those students taking almost an additional year of time or 2 years to finish. We looked at a small sample of historically Black colleges that are part of the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, and what we found, consistent with what I shared, was that a number of our students are not finishing on time and slightly below the national median for students who finish within that time period. And then when we talk about credit accumulation and credit completion, what we're also finding is that a number of students that are attending historically Black colleges and across our national median, African American students in particular, are not accumulating the amount of credit hours needed for on-time graduation. And so these data points that I've shared, contribute to some of the big issues that we know we deal with on a daily basis. Uninformed major decisions, spending too much money, accumulating too much debt associated with those additional classes, and then ultimately not graduating. And so for us as an organization, we kind of leaned in and focused particularly on a few key strategies. We know that there are a number of reasons why students don't end up completing or persisting or are not retained. For us, we try to hone in on a few different strategies that can be replicated and we think have value and are really proven to see significant double and in some case triple-digit gains across the country, and we refer to them as our game changers. And there are these strategies right here. Some of you are familiar with them. They're 15 to finish. It's math pathways, so ensuring that students are taking the right math course that might be something different than college algebra. It might be statistics or quantitative reasoning. Co-requisite support, where we're ensuring that students are not only enrolled in their gateway course, but able to complete it in a shorter amount of time than the typical 2 or 3 section cycle of remediation. GPS direct or guided pathways, academic mapping, meta majors, proactive advising, and then structured scheduling as well. What we've also figured out is that all of those strategies kind of align in a sequence. When we think about how that work has been done across the country, what we're finding is that there's certain things that are really in a faculty role, and there's some things that are more in the advising administrator role. And so, when I kind of lay out those strategies together, what you see is 15 to finish is really kind of one of the earlier cultural shifts for our students to ensure that they have a good understanding of what it's going to take for them to finish on time. And so as we talk about 15 to finish, and I just want to remind you here that there's once again, a Q&A kind of checkbox if you hover over the top of your screen. So as you have any questions, feel free to post them in that Q&A section. But as we talk about 15 to finish as a game changer strategy, the first thing I think that it is important to start the conversation is really demystifying what we mean by 15 to finish. 15 to finish is really about how do you get students to get on track for completing 30 credit hours within a year. So it's not saying every single student has to take 15 credit hours per semester. We do feel like it's absolutely valuable and critical for every student to know the importance of them finishing on time, the associated costs for not finishing on time, and how that can have an impact on their lives if they don't do so. And so this has kind of been taking getting a lot of national attention, and we're starting to see some amazing results across the country at different types of institutions, including MSIs. I touched on some broad data points, but just in case you kind of want to see, some of the big picture pieces around this, what we're finding is that for associate degree granting institutions, the students most likely to graduate are those that complete 30 credit hours within their first year. Actually, that number is almost 62%, and it drops down dramatically when you start to see where students enter. And so I think the point in this, and there's a similar type of graph for bachelor's degree, but what this really tells us is that, as much as we want students to finish and we encourage them and we say, if you're part-time, just keep pushing, you'll ultimately get there. The reality is that too few students actually finish if they aren't taking a full-time load. And this is what these numbers look like nationally. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but if you just look on the left, what you're seeing is that only about 27% of students are taking what we consider the amount of credit hours to be on time. As a matter of fact, we've been changing our language and our vernacular from just saying full-time to on-time. Most students understand that full-time is 12 credit hours. 12 credit hours because that's what's required for financial aid. But, so most students kind of fall in that category on the right, not realizing that one extra class per semester or maybe a couple of classes in the summer or a mini-mester will get them closer to on-time graduation. And I've already kind of showed this data a little bit, but nationally, too many Hispanic African-American students are not completing 30 credit hours within a year for that on-time status. We've actually found something quite interesting across the country, especially students who are advisors who work at non-minority serving institutions. What they found is that they, were encouraging students not to take 15 credit hours because they didn't want to overload them or be too burdensome in their academic kind of focus. And what they were finding was that was actually not the best way to get the students closer to graduation, and these numbers reflect that. So for us, the big strategy for reducing the cost of college is to ensure more students take the credits needed to graduate on time. That's the spirit of 15 to finish and what this is all about. There's a huge financial implication that we have to communicate to our students. Many of us are telling students, an extra year of school costs tuition and loans. But then when you add in the cost of that loan over 10 years or so or longer, if it's maybe a 30-year loan, an extra year of school might cost you almost $18,000, $19,000. But there's another component to that has not always been shared. And that's that extra year of school now means that you're not in the job that you should be in, gaining that salary. So now you have foregone salary earnings, you have foregone retirement savings if you have one of those jobs that offers any kind of 401k. And so that $18,000, $19,000, when you add in those opportunity costs, means that most students, on average, an extra year of school is costing them over their lifetime almost $150,000. And when students and parents hear this, that is a behavioral nudge to kind of really help them think through the return on investment for trying to pull in an extra class here or there whenever they can. And so the individuals that are most likely to help make this cultural shift are our academic advisors, the people who get a chance to spend time with students, the student affairs folks who oversee new student orientation, the faculty members who also serve as advisors as well. These individuals are probably best situated to be able to communicate the importance of a 15 to finish or a 30 credit hour in a year campaign. And so when you think about how you go about doing that, the first thing that you got to do is look at your own data. And so for those institutions that are participating, is in part of our initiative as far as that cohort of 20 institutions and those that are doing it, one of the first things that we encourage them to do is look at their own data. And more often than not, most institutions will find that most students are not taking the amount of credits needed for on-time graduation. This is the data that University of Hawaii provided when they first launched their campaign, and they were the brainchild of this 15 to finish effort. And the first thing that they looked at were the numbers of students by percentages that were taking 30 credit hours or on-time graduation credit accumulation. And then they looked at those students 4 years later, and what they found was that most of those students that took 30 credit hours in that first year, those were the students who tended to graduate on time. And what they also found was that it wasn't just the top ranked students. Across every level of academic preparedness, Pell eligible students, first generation students, underrepresented students, students of color, every single student, no matter where they entered into the institution, having an on-time or 15 credits in their first semester or 30 within their first year led to stronger outcomes, higher GPA, and stronger gains with regard to graduation. There was another study that was done by the Community College Research Center, and basically they found the same exact thing. What you're looking at right here is a graph that shows, this very top line shows those students that accumulated 30 credit hours within their first year and how many more of them ended up moving on to success. So one of the things that we've been asking our participating institutions and those institutions that are interested, we've actually provided a data template to kind of have you think about some base level things that you may want to find from your IR department. And it's not, I don't think, a very difficult kind of pull. What you really can do is find out very quickly, what did our 2017 or 2016 cohort of incoming students look like? How many of them enrolled in 15 credit hours? How many of them completed 15 credit hours? And if you initiate a 15 to finish campaign, you can compare that with your 2018 cohort that'll come in this fall or this upcoming summer, and quickly be able to see what kind of gains you've made and continue to build on that 15 to finish effort. The one thing and the story I continue to tell everyone across the country is that the reason why I am so passionate about this 15 to finish effort is because I spent 20 years on college campuses. I worked at a historically Black college. I worked at an institution, Georgia State, that has pretty much closed the achievement gap among students of color and Pell eligible students. All the institutions I've worked at, I've always served a lot of first generation low income students. And so I'm always a little bit of a skeptic when I hear about a new initiative. I'm like, well, this will never work for my students, or let me check and see, because I want to make sure that what we see is not going to harm my students and their families in any way. And so I decided to really just test out this idea of 15 to finish. And I went to a new student orientation session that I was responsible for, and I asked the parents and students in that room, and this is a 4-year institution. I said, how many of you plan to take more than 12 credit hours in your first semester? And about 1/10 of the room raised their hand. And I followed up with a question, which was, how many of you plan to graduate within 4 years? And almost every single hand in the room was raised. And what that told me was that many students wanted to graduate on time, but we were never telling them what it took to do that. And so at that point, I was like, you know what, we're on to something. This is an opportunity for us to start kind of incorporating this into new student orientation, to sharing it with our academic advisors, sharing it with parents, talking about the value and the cost benefit of finishing on time. And this is what those numbers ended up looking like. That year that I had that conversation was in 2012. 2 years later, and 3 years out, we saw increases of almost 40 percentage points of numbers of students that chose to enroll in 15 credit hours. And even as you look at that 2015 line, what you find is that there were still, like I said, a number of overwhelmingly commuter campus, first generation students. There were still 33% of our student population that chose not to enroll for life circumstances, work, etc. What I was talking about is the difference between that 27% and that 67%. These were students that wanted to finish on time, could take an extra course here or there and get closer to 30 credits within a year, but we weren't even telling them that. We weren't even having that conversation with them. And to me, that's the most important part of why this campaign is critical, because there are students that want to finish on time. We just haven't been communicating that appropriately. And that was my institution, but there are minority serving institutions across the country that are seeing similar results. I just got some recent data from the state of Mississippi, and I was just overwhelmed at Mississippi Valley State's numbers, because they were one of those institutions that I had this conversation with a couple of years ago, and now 97% of their students, first-time, full-time students, are enrolled in 15+ credit hours, because they've created an opt-out versus an opt-in model where every student is enrolled in 15 credit hours unless they have a conversation with an academic advisor and choose to do otherwise. Even when we talk about why we don't do it or the potential challenges associated with it, everybody says, well, it's going to cost resources, it's going to cost money. And this is one of the few strategies that really requires nothing additional from your campus from a resource perspective other than just sharing things, sharing data, having conversation with academic advisors and folks that can help kind of relay that to families and students. I told you about my institution and what that experience was. That credit accumulation led to an additional 5% increase in retention. And then when I looked at what does that 5% mean for my institution, what I found was that 5% at an institution of 9,000 students at the time meant almost an additional $1.5 million in revenue for our campus, which then was able to be used for additional retention initiatives. And if we kept those students and continue to retain them, those numbers continue to grow exponentially. And that's why this campaign is so important. When we talk about establishing a 15 to finish campaign, it really boils down to these core components right here. It's collecting the data, as I talked about. It's adding a component into new student orientation where you can actually communicate it very clearly to parents and students. It's building it into the degree maps. It's that opt-out versus opt-in model, and it's reinforcing it through a comprehensive marketing campaign. When I talk about those things, this is what a map for Middlesex Community College looks like. They're even including 15 to finish as a logo on the top, just to constantly provide those nudges to students. The communication strategies have included really highlighting that 15 to finish branding and materials. Some people are putting them in their syllabi, posters around campuses. Any place that you can share that message is a way to nudge students to understand the cost and the importance of finishing their degree on time. And then even policies associated with it, ensuring that the credit hours are capped at 60 or 120 credit hours whenever possible. Default scheduling. I've heard a lot of institutions share that they already have something that's called flat or banded tuition, where 12 credit hours may cost the same as 15 or 18. They've now started changing their language where they're saying, take 4 classes, get the 5th class free, because that's essentially what it is. Everyone loves a deal. And so to be able to help them understand how they can do that is also a good way of kind of incorporating internal policies that reinforce those strategies. Nationally, you will continue to see, especially since we're working with a lot of public institutions, we're starting to see some state level policies around state aid programs where they're tying those aid programs to 30 credit hours per year. And so if you're at one of those institutions where that conversation may be happening, this is an opportunity for you to kind of create some structural reforms internally so that your students are able to benefit, and your institution, if you're in a performance-based funding climate, can benefit from more students being targeted toward on-time graduation. And the one thing that continued to come up over and over again is that after having this conversation, and once people had a broad understanding of what it was a lot of people said, Danifu and Complete College America, you've made the case, this makes sense, we've looked at our data, but we don't have money for a comprehensive marketing campaign. That's just not something that we can do. Our resources are limited, as Jose Luis Santos shared a little earlier. And so what we decided to do was create a comprehensive marketing campaign that is available, open source, and free to anybody that wants to use it. And that information is currently available on the CompleteCollege.org website. So you can literally take the materials that we have, slap your logo on it, make modifications, and never have to spend a dime to initiate that campaign. And so there are posters that look like this, where we're seeing across the country. If you type in 15 to finish on Twitter, you'll literally see hundreds of institutions using these types of materials. They're sharing them with their students. We have brochures that really kind of help to make the case, all kind of just promotional items, including social media capital. So things that you can include, including text and sample language that you can very easily incorporate to your marketing campaign on Instagram or Facebook and Twitter. All of these images, all that information is already here for you and available to you right now. And you can download all of that at CompleteCollege.org website. And all you have to do is go in. If you don't have a profile, it's very simple. You just kind of provide your name, your email address, a couple other key points, and just say, I'm interested in 15 to finish, and all those materials will be available to you. And so this campaign is really about setting the bar. Many more students are proving across the country that they can get closer to on-time degree completion. Even students that are going part-time are finding that they can pick up a credit hour here and there. And even so, if their plan was a 5 or 6 year plan, even if you can reduce that by a semester or a year, that's going to have a huge impact for that student and their lives. And this is not just a Complete College America idea. The national organization, NACADA, which represents 13,000 professional academic advisors across the country, partner with us on a set of shared principles to highlight the importance of this 15 to finish degree campaign. And so they're working with us to share this across the country as well. And this is kind of an older map, but this was, I think, a year ago. There were about 200 institutions doing the 15 to finish types of campaigns, and they're calling them different things. But what we're finding now is that number has probably doubled, because every single day we're finding a new institution that is launching a similar type of initiative. And the minority serving institutions that are part of this Momentum Pathways initiative, they will all be launching in 2018. Some of them have already started. And so that's what the 15 to finish initiative is about broadly. I talked about the CCA website or web portal. I highly encourage you to take a look, because it's not just the 15 to finish. It's 15 to finish is the first step, but it's coupled with all the other momentum strategies, co-requisite support, math pathways, the whole guided pathways slate of strategies. And there are a lot of different materials that you can find on this new web portal that will give you access to information, help you make the case. The 15 to finish toolkit that we talked about is not just a bunch of kind of bells and whistles and imagery. It also includes presentations, a presentation that you can use at new student orientation. It includes a video that shows 15 to finish that you can use as well. It shows a number of different things, including Q&A, like if a student says they can't take 15 credit hours, how should an academic advisor or faculty advisor respond? There are data points that may be helpful to you if you need that. All those resources, all those things that I talked about, knowing the problem, generating buy-in, designing the strategy. And then there's a support community of individuals across the country that are doing this work. One of the things that I think excites me most about this project is that by the time we start looking at our numbers in fall, I am positive we'll see institutions, minority serving institutions that have taken on this charge and are seeing some amazing results from launching this initiative. And we plan to use those individuals as content experts and to be able to share with other HBCUs and HSIs across the country how those strategies can be replicated. And so for those of you that are already part of the 15 to finish movement, or you're involved in the Momentum Pathways initiative with minority serving institutions, I will share with you, this is something you've seen already, but I want to also kind of put it in context for those of you who may be joining the call and have not started or didn't get that same level or have that same level of familiarity. One of the first things we tell you to do is to do some baseline data collection. not very hard, just how many students over the past have been taking 15 credit hours in their first semester and, within their first year. These webinars are part of that activity. And those participating institutions that I've shared a little earlier, they are responsible for submitting an implementation plan in February. And so that implementation plan will include how they plan to launch this and a number of other questions. By March of this year, whether you're part of the Momentum Pathways initiative or you're just planning to launch it yourself, you should really you have all of your plans and processes in place, particularly including new student orientation staff or student affairs if they're not included in this conversation, because you want to be able to highlight how that video can get played in new student orientation, how you add a couple of slides into a presentation that help make that point. For those institutions that are part of the Momentum Pathways initiative, there are also some small sub-grants, or what we're calling micro-grants. They're not a lot of money, but they're only for those 20 institutions that attended the CCA annual convening and are participating in this initiative. But you can talk to Jose Luis Santos or Dr. Nia Heidel. Both of them will be able to talk you through the different things that you can provide or that can be offered. Some institutions are using those small micro-grants to print materials or to kind of get some high quality posters, et cetera, maybe some t-shirts, just to kind of make the case. That campaign should take place from the time students start entering your institution all the way to the time that they enroll in August or September of this upcoming year. And then you start continuing to track how they're doing. So looking at some quantitative data, comparing it against previous cohorts, and then just kind of figuring out what we did well and where do we go moving forward. That's the 15 to Finish initiative. That's where we are. That's why this work is so absolutely important. And so at this time, I'm going to stop. I'm going to see if Nicholas can come back and maybe share your thoughts on any questions that might have arisen or that have not been answered already. And so I'll turn the floor back over to Nicholas.
All right, thank you. So we've had a few questions that are related to non-traditional students. How do we market this campaign? My initial answer, but more happy for you guys to weigh in, was that obviously one, not everybody is able to register for 15 hours, but the important part obviously is the communication. I think all students need to understand the implications of not registering for 12 hours, as Dr. Elson was mentioning, the added cost, the delayed graduation, and in some cases, potentially even the availability of some courses that they need, like gateway courses and things like that. But I think this is when the communication is really important on our end. I don't know if you guys would care to weigh in that regard.
Sure. No, I think what you've shared is exactly correct. It's interesting because people will ask sometimes, well, how is this campaign different for transfer students or adult learners, non-traditional students? And, initially we're like, okay, so what does the language need to be any different? And what we found is that, we use the same exact campaign for all the students. And I'm finding that everybody takes it in their own unique way. And so, many adult learners that are returning back to school, their goal is to get through as quickly as possible. So this is extremely valuable information for them. Transfer students may not have gotten that, even though they might be coming in with some credit hours. Sharing the value of them finishing on time and what it takes based on what they're transferring in, I think is something that works across the board. So a lot of this is just informational, making sure that everybody understands the importance. They can then make an informed decision, but we shouldn't limit them from hearing some of the absolute high impact practices that are associated with it. So I think you're absolutely right with that, Nicholas.
All right. Another question deals with, and it's something that we're working on quite clearly right now, is about are there tools, resources, suggestions for helping students select a major at or before the orientation so that their momentum is focused on an intentional end goal? So obviously, we're looking at meta majors and everything else. Yes.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And so, you know, this webinar was primarily focused on 15 to finish, but I would encourage you, if you go to the CompleteCollege.org website under the GPS Direct or Guided Pathways section, there's a highlight of a number of different things that will help students kind of narrow their choice or thoughts about a particular major. And so one of the things that we talk about frequently is this idea of meta majors. And so putting majors into broad buckets, you know, maybe 6 or 7 categories, so that students can, you know, can really see how those majors are connected to careers. One of the most exciting things that we are working on, and you will hear more about it soon, there's a little bit about it on the website right now, but a project that we're calling Purpose First. And it is, we are actually developing a process for what or how to help students make the big major choice before they end up on an academic map or an academic map that's not aligned with their interest and passion. We know that most students will not choose or, you know, will not know what they want to do for the rest of their life in their first semester of college. However, there are too many students making very uninformed major choices, not understanding the labor market data, you know, what it really requires, what's the demand like for those particular fields in their particular areas. So those are some things that are available to you right now. By the summer, you will have a lot more information around Purpose First. We're actually charged with creating a whole new section of our platform around Purpose First and career pathways, and there will be a resource guide that will accompany that.
Thank you. We also have a question about, you know, a few people mentioned about the slides in the webinar, so just want to confirm that the slides as well as the webinar, the recording of the webinar will soon be available on our website, on the web platform, Complete College America's web platform. So obviously, if you're unable to attend, or if you thought like, hey, you know, I'd like to share this information with somebody else, please, you know, we'll share the URL. And once the webinar is available on our website to the implementation teams on your college, so they'll be able to share that information with everybody else. Another question.
Right. And Nicholas, if I could just add one other quick piece on that. You know, I didn't spend a lot of time talking about this, but for those of you that are not familiar with Complete College America, we're very fortunate to be resourced by a number of philanthropic organizations. And so all of our materials, everything we provide is open source. So we're not charging individuals to get this information. So all the webinars, all the data that we provided, all the presentations from not only this webinar, but other different strategies in the past, they're all available to you. And we're always available as personal resources. If you just want to reach out to us, Nicholas and myself, we'd always be happy to kind of talk you through or connect you with someone that can answer that question or might have implemented that strategy. Please continue, Nicholas.
No, that's it. The other questions were about default scheduling, but that's something like, you know, with block schedule, as I answered the question on chat. If you have questions about, you know, again, feel free to either the next few minutes, I guess, either answer them through Q&A or through the chat function. We'd be happy to address these live right now during the webinar, or as Dr. Nelson mentioned, if the question comes up later, please feel free to contact us. We'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Right. You know, and I'm looking right now, the time is 10:47 Eastern, and I don't see any other additional questions that have popped up, but you are always welcome, as Nicholas shared, to contact us. I lead this national kind of 15 to finish effort strategy for Complete College America. I'd be more than happy to talk through it with you. The one thing that I think I want to make sure that I don't lose in this is that if you are already seeing gains, or you're like, you know what, we're going to do this, we're going to go in, we're going to, you know, see what we can do to make a huge impact for our students this upcoming fall, or if you're already into that work, please let us know. One of the things that we do is on the advocacy side is we like to shout it from the rooftops when we hear good news, especially when it's coming out of our minority serving institutions. We want to be able to highlight you through blog posts. We want to be able to tell that story so that you can get some additional attention and to ensure that the narrative is one that highlights the great work that's taking place. That's what all of this is about. It's about you. It's about your students. It's something that we are absolutely committed to, and we look forward to working with you on it as we move forward in the future. So with that being said, you know, we're going to reclaim some time, give you a few minutes back to kind of talk about this a little bit more with colleagues, think about what you need. For those of you that are part of the Momentum Pathways Initiative, you will be contacted by Dr. Heidel and Dr. Santos to ensure that your data is in, to work with you on your implementation plans. And I definitely encourage you to apply for some of those micro grants that might be able to save your institution a few valuable resources as you start to launch your campaign this spring, during the summer, and for all those students that will be entering in the fall 2018. So with that, we're going to go ahead and end. Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate you. If there's anything Complete College America can do to help you, please let us know.